It was so terribly cold. Snow was falling, and it was almost dark. Evening came on, the last evening of the year. In the cold and gloom, a poor little girl, bareheaded and barefoot, was walking through the streets. It is true she had on a pair of slippers when she left home, but they were not of much use. They were very large, so large indeed that they belonged to her mother, and the poor little girl lost them in running across the street to avoid two carriages that were rolling along at terrible speed. One of the slippers she could not find, and a boy seized upon the other one and ran away with it. And so the little maiden walked on with her tiny naked feet that were quite red and blue from cold. In an old apron, she carried a quantity of matches, and she held a box of them in her hand as well. No one had bought a single box from her all day long, and no one had given her a single penny. Shivering with cold and hunger, she crept along, a perfect picture of misery. The snowflakes fell on her long fair hair, which hung in pretty curls over her neck. Lights were shining from every window, and there was a wonderful smell of roast goose, for it was New Year's Eve. Yes, she remembered that. In a corner between two houses, she sat down and drew up her little feet under her, but she could not keep off the cold, and she dared not to go home. How could she? Neither she had sold any matches nor earned a single cent, and her father would surely beat her. Besides, it was almost as cold as home as here, for they had nothing over them but a roof through which the wind whistled, even though the biggest cracks had been stuffed with straw and rags. Her hands were almost dead with cold. Perhaps a burning match might be some good. If she could draw it from the bundle and strike it against the wall just to warm her fingers. She drew one out. How it sputtered and burned! It made a warm, bright flame, like a little candle, as she held her hands over it. But it gave a strange light. It really seemed to the little girl as if she were sitting before a great iron stove with shining brass knobs and a brass cover. How wonderfully the fire burned, how comfortable it was. The youngster stretched out her feet to warm them too. Then the light went out. The stove vanished, and she had only the remains of the burnt match in her hand. She rubbed another against the wall. It burned brightly, and where the light fell on the wall, there the wall became transparent like a veil, so that she could see into the room. On the table was spread a snow-white tablecloth. Upon it was a splendid porcelain service, and the roast goose was steaming famously with its stuffing of apple and dried plums, and the match went out, and she could only see the thick, cold wall. She lighted another match. Now she was sitting under the most beautiful Christmas tree. It was much larger and much more beautiful than the one she had seen last Christmas through the glass door at the rich merchant's home. Thousands of candles burned on the green branches, and colored pictures like those in the shopping windows looked down at her. The little maiden stretched out her hands towards them when the match went out. But the Christmas lights mounted higher. She saw them now as bright stars in the sky. One of them even fell down, forming a long line of fire.
Someone is dying,
said the little girl. For her old grandmother, the only person who had ever loved her, and who was now no more, had told her that when a star falls, a soul was going up to God. She drew another match against the wall. It was again light, and in the brightness, there stood her old grandmother, so bright and radiant, so mild, and with such an expression of love.
Grandmother,
cried the little one.
oh, take me with you, grandmother. You go when the match burns out. You will vanish like the warm stove, like the delicious roast goose, and like the magnificent Christmas tree. Take me, grandmother. Please, take me with you.
And now she rubbed the whole bundle of matches quickly against the wall, for she wished to keep her grandmother with her. The matches gave such a brilliant light that it was brighter than at noonday, and her grandmother had never appeared so beautiful. She took the little girl in her arms, and both of them flew in brightness and joy above the earth, very, very high. And up there was neither cold, nor hunger, nor fear. They were with God. But in the corner, at the cold hour of dawn, sat the poor girl, with rosy cheeks and with a smiling mouth, leaning against the wall, frozen to death on the last evening of the old year. The New Year's sun rose upon a little pathetic figure. Stiff and stark sat the child there with her matches, of which one bundle had been burnt.
She wanted to warm herself,
people said. And no one had the slightest suspicion of what beautiful things she had seen, and how happily she had gone with her old grandmother into the bright new year.